President Trump has arrived in Brussels ahead of the NATO summit. This comes amid escalating tensions with some of our closest allies. As we mentioned, the president's trip abroad will also include a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In recent days, Mr. Trump has said Putin is, quote, fine, while taking our NATO allies to task.
NATO has not treated us fairly, but I think we'll work something out. We pay far too much, and they pay far too little. But we will work it out, and all countries will be happy. The UK, that's a situation that's been going on for a long time. So I have NATO, I have the UK, which is in somewhat turmoil, and I have Putin. Frankly, Putin may be the easiest of them all. Who would think?
I want to bring in John Wagner. He's a national political reporter for the Washington Post. Okay, John, President says that Putin's meeting might be easier than working with our own NATO allies. If you're a NATO ally at this point, how troubling is this? And what can we expect ahead of this summit in NATO, which is really focused on Russian aggression?
Yeah, I think that comment certainly raised some eyebrows this morning. That came as the president was leaving the White House en route to Joint Base Andrews to get on Air Force One. And before he got out of the White House, he was tweeting on the same subject about the military defense spending commitments of NATO allies. And in fact, just a few minutes ago, aboard Air Force One, he returned to the subject again with another tweet suggesting that some of the allies should be paying the United States back for defense costs. So he really is harping on this subject, and I'm sure it will continue once he's actually on the ground with the other leaders.
Do you get the sense, John, that they'll be able to sort of hash out some agreement that'll satisfy the president on defense spending with NATO? Are they on track to work something out?
Well, I mean, they have an agreement that they've been working toward, and I think there's a lot of frustration among other leaders that President Trump continues to just harp on it as much as he does. It would seem they might have to do something else to satisfy him. But there is, a lot of concern that he will be taking this tone with them just a couple days before meeting with Vladimir Putin, who obviously has been more of a foe, or at least Russia has been more of a foe.
President Trump's take is that NATO spending really helps our allies a lot more than the U.S. Can you give us sort of a sense of context about exactly why NATO was formed to begin with, and really what are the benefits for the U.S. of being in an alliance like this?
Well, Trump has really questioned that. He's singled out Germany in the last few days, and at a rally talked about whether or not the United States gets much at all from protecting Germany. So those kind of comments have really set off alarm bells for an alliance that was meant to protect from Russian aggression.
So the president, we know, has also picked fights with our allies over trade. I mean, what can you read from this, John? Is this a bargaining chip to sort of get them to spend more on defense? And do you think ultimately, will it work?
Well, he's certainly trying to use trade as a bargaining chip on defense and other issues. And it's really unclear whether it's going to work. On another front, the United States has started a trade war with China, and at the same time, Trump is voicing concern about whether or not China is being aggressive enough toward North Korea and helping enforce sanctions to achieve an end that Trump wants to see there. So, it is a volatile mix, and it's kind of hard to know where this is ultimately headed.
The president was also asked about whether Vladimir Putin is a friend or a foe ahead of the meeting. Here's what he had to say.
I really can't say right now. As far as I'm concerned, a competitor. It's a competitor. I think that getting along with Russia, getting along with China, getting along with others is a good thing, not a bad thing. I've said that many times.
So it's a friendlier tone he's trying to strike ahead of the sit-down. Despite Russia's election meddling, other hostilities, why is this meeting even happening, and what does he hope to get out of this?
Well, that's actually a really good question. There hasn't been that much said about what's on the agenda. And President Trump and Vladimir Putin are supposed to be meeting one-on-one. I think a lot of it's about relationship building. This will be the first formal summit they've had together, though they have talked in person before and several times on the phone. So, I mean, there are a host of areas where the two countries could cooperate on Syria, North Korea, and other issues. And Trump has said repeatedly that he wants to, strike a different tone with Russia and hopes that that will pay dividends in a number of different ways.
After suggesting that this meeting might be easier, do you get the sense that he can really push hard Putin, against the wall on some of these issues that have been a thorn in the side of the U.S. for so long? Can he get anything out of Putin at this point?
Well, I mean, I think, as you mentioned, election meddling is going to be, quite an interesting topic if it comes up.
If it comes up, that's the point, right, John? Do you think he'll actually bring it up?
It's hard to know. I mean, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said just the other day that Trump plans to, and then shortly after that, there was a tweet from the president repeating Putin's claims that they had nothing to do with interference in the elections. So, frankly, I think it's anyone's guess, and with just the two of them alone in a room, we may never know.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, I want to ask you about the Trump administration, who's struggling to reach this court-imposed deadline to reunite separated immigrant children who are under 5 with their parents. Why can't they meet the deadline, and what's the sense? What happens next?
Well, there was the deadline today is for reuniting children under age 5 with their families. These are the migrant families trying to cross the U.S.-Mexico border. And there are a lot of logistical issues. A lawyer for the Trump administration said yesterday that some of these parents have already been deported. Others of them are facing criminal charges, and under those circumstances, they can't reunite them. But at least according to the representations, about half of those 100 or so with children under age 5 should be reunited today. The president was actually asked about this morning as he was leaving the White House as well.
Yeah, in fact, John, if you don't mind, I want to actually play that bite for you from the president and his reaction about missing the deadline.
Well, I have a solution. Tell people not to come to our country illegally. That's the solution. Don't come to our country illegally.
Not much remorse there. Doesn't seem like he felt bad about the detentions there. Despite signing an executive order to reunite these families, do you get the sense, is he reversing course yet again?
I don't know that he's reversing course, but he went ahead and signed the executive order, but has maintained this fairly hardline rhetoric about the no tolerance immigration policy that has resulted in the separations. And I think a lot of people have observed that there just doesn't seem to be a lot of empathy there for these families.
All right, John Wagner, thank you so much for joining us, John.
Thank you.